You're strong.
I know.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the movies.
Welcome to SuperWonder Legacy. I am Jared. I'm here with Brit. What's up, Brit?
Hello, hello.
And we're here with JHEAT. What's up, brother?
Flame on! How's everybody doing tonight?
All right. So today we are talking about a live-action Crisis on Infinite Earths movie because one of the problems that was present when James Gunn showed up and wanted to start his own live-action universe, which is fine. He's allowed to want to do that. It's just we didn't get a conclusion to the original DCEU. And the Flash does not count. So, yeah, really at this point, and Brit, you can back me up on this. I'm really, this needed a conclusion in some way to make me believe that you can complete a story later.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so with WB's, I guess, they wanted to rush to get to where Marvel, is as far as, establishing their Justice League, establishing the multiverse, I think, because to see all of these characters, they see IPs, they see toy sales, they see, Halloween costumes. But the thing that Marvel did was first they had a 10-year, head start. And they had someone with one vision in a sense, but with WB they have too many cooks in the kitchen. And with that, they didn't know what iterations to go with. You had they wanted Bale still as Batman, but then they wanted a new Superman, but then they wanted a new Batman as well. And Zack Snyder had his own vision for Batman. So, you had these different iterations, and it's kind of how do you mesh all that together? I believe before Henry was chosen as Superman, Zack wanted Joe Manganiello as Superman.
I could actually see that. That's actually really funny. I can see him as Superman.
He could have pulled it off.
And so, yeah, I think it was a clash a little bit with that. But Nolan, I think it was an agreement on Cavill being Superman. So, but still, the casting, they couldn't get it together. And then you have Wonder Woman too. Her whole backstory is just a mess. Didn't know if they wanted her to start 1,000 years, 100 years. Didn't know, just how to start anything. And with all of that, they wanted to just put everything together, and also homage read the Donner films too. So yeah, they wanted to pay homage to all of that. And then you have these events in comics as well, and with synergy. So just with with all of that and the whole obsession with Crisis, everything was building on to that of multiple versions coming together. And yeah, it was just a mess for WB and DC.
Well, the other thing is when they say that they were setting up a Crisis on Infinite Earths movie, the thing is, it's nothing they did short of a deleted Batfleck ending in The Flash set up Crisis. It would be one thing if you showed the Anti-Monitor doing something, or tease, oh, there's this force that's annihilating alternate worlds. They didn't do any of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, JHEAT, but not once was anything other besides a deleted Batfleck ending. Nothing indicated Crisis.
But Thank you for that, Brit. But before I move forward, I just want to say, first of all, a lot of that, and I can say this especially, even though I wasn't active on YouTube at the time, Hamada was just talking out of his ass to please shareholders. Sorry, that's my one curse word on the show. So I'm trying to respect Jared's brand here. But come on, let's call it for what it is. Mm-hmm. As for The Rush, yes, it was folly because you can't build everything. Yes, you have these IPs. Yes, they're iconic. Some arguably more stronger than DC than Marvel is with some IPs. That is true. But you still need storytelling, engagement, continuity, character building. You still need to build up to it. You probably could have easily gotten away with Batman, regardless of any iteration from the Dark Knight trilogy alone. Batman, you don't have to do a whole lot. Superman, you really don't have to do a whole lot. The only ones you really would have had trouble or had to give solo films to are Wonder Woman, Flash, and Green Lantern. Maybe Cyborg, depending if you want to put him a part of the Teen Titans. But again, Cyborg is better ensemble than carrying his own title. I've always said that. But even with all of that, The Rush was a mistake. Acknowledge what Marvel's doing. Let them, because at the end, you're the same industry. You're all making money. Actually build up to it.
Well, not only that, if you look at the box office returns that the DCEU was getting, the original DCEU, it was on par, if not exceeding, the earliest Marvel movies. In other words, if you look at the box office returns of like Iron Man 1, Hulk, Iron Man 2, and all that stuff, up until Avengers.
They were doing early phase 1 numbers. I completely agree.
Which is fine. What they should have said is like, hey, it's going to build up to it because they were going to build, essentially they were going to build up to it until we get to this point.
But
go ahead.
That's the thing, is that when Nolan's films reached that billion, WB had high expectations that Man of Steel was going to reach that level because it's Superman. That's the expectation. But when it didn't, at the time that they set, it was like, okay, well, we have to put in Batman, in this duo. First of all, they didn't have to do a versus thing, and it really wasn't a versus too much. But yeah, no one kind of wanted that versus yet. You want to build up that friendship first, and then go on with them having a conflict, and then, with the Justice League. I mean, as JHEAT said, you do a Wonder Woman film, you do the Flash film, if you Cyborg, Green Lantern, and stuff like that. But the way that they were kind of forced in with the cameo of the surveillance for Diana, or like Gal, she said that she didn't know that she was auditioning for Wonder Woman. She thought she was auditioning for like Catwoman or something like that. So she was playing like this mysterious femme fatale type until the reveal, which was in the trailer, but the reveal that she was actually Wonder Woman. And that is something that you shouldn't do with her. And again, it goes back to her being the mysterious in the shadows because of, her feeling of humanity or whatever. But the rest of the Justice League was on a computer. You're showing them as cameos, on a computer. That wasn't very settling for the audience. So it's a lot that they just didn't do as well as Marvel. Yes, Marvel's earlier movies made less, but again, we're going from a decade ago to DC characters that they set high expectations because those characters before Marvel's. And that is another thing that was their downfall, was putting too much of a high expectation.
Yeah. The other thing I'm going to say, I still think that surveillance scene could have worked as the post-credit scene to Batman versus Superman. Like, all of a sudden, Bruce or Diana still is going through her computer. She like finds those video files, and then all of a sudden they start teasing the actual Justice League, and then it just cuts. That could have been the actual post-credit scene. And they're like, oh, we actually have, there are actually other people with powers. What do you want to say, JHEAT?
Although I prefer the Ultimate Edition more, I'll even say this for the theatrical as well. BVS was trying to do too much at one time. Yeah. Set up Justice League, be a Superman 2, and a de facto Batman movie in the context of the DCEU. Just too much, too fast, and yes, Frank Miller and The Dark Knight Rises, you can use that to a degree, but it doesn't work in this context, because in the context of that story, Superman was being leveraged by the abduction of his family, following orders with the government, being a Boy Scout, what have you. That's a completely different context to, and although they do play a little bit of that with this in the Marfa scene, it's just not executed well. It's supposed to be, this guy's just trying to protect his family. I lost mine twice over, and just Bruce having this epiphany. But unless you watch the Ultimate Edition, and even then, it's not really set up well. Like, key plot threads and actual storytelling bits are cut out in that 30-minute block.
Well, here's the thing that we have to understand is, like, so when Zack came on, he was supposed to just do a trilogy of Superman movies similar to Nolan's Batman movies. But then WB is like, okay, you have to do can you do a shared universe? Okay, cool. Can you do the Justice League now? And he's like, I mean, I can force it, but it's not going to be as organic. You're like, I don't care. Get us to the Justice League now. That's why we never got like we got a Wonder Woman movie. That's why we never got like a movie, a Flash or Cyborg movie before Justice League. Even though Zack wanted it, he literally never got the opportunity.
And I hate that happen a lot. Okay, we could argue studio interference until we're blue in the face. I know I'm trying to keep this PG out of respect for your brand, Jerry.
Thank you, dude.
But we could argue this until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, there's no way. First of all, Crisis is a very bloated. You would need way too much setup from.
Yeah, that's when Hamada was like, we were saying up Crisis. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like someone that's trying to make the fans campaign for Hamada to keep his job. Like, no, he's going to bring back Crisis. That's why, Brit, when you told me, oh, yeah, he was saying up Crisis, I didn't believe him because that's what that sounded like. Because I'm like,
it's a desperate move.
At the very least. Well, JHEAT, how far back did they set up Thanos?
As literally the end of Phase 1 with Avengers 2012.
Yeah, the last shot of Avengers is Thanos. So my thinking here is that if you were really trying to set that up, one of the movies that you were coming out with that you could have influenced, like even Flash, you could have put a post-credit scene in there of like the Anti-Monitor showing up, or like him being a Batman being held captive by the Anti-Monitor, or say something is destroying these worlds. And guess what? Then you tease Crisis. It's literally that simple. You don't even have to have the Anti-Monitor show up. Just say worlds are vanishing. There you go. That's Crisis. Well, yeah, go ahead, Brit.
Well, and we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. That is actually what Flash was doing. Mm-hmm. Of course, Flash was in production hell for years.
That is true.
10 years.
So when when Flash finally came out, it went back into production hell because I believe it's 3 endings that it had.
One of them, yeah.
We had the one with Clooney that we actually saw. We have one, I think it is the one where Cavill and Gal show up. And there was one more I forgot. But
I think it was one with I think that the one with Cavill was just the third one was just going to be Keaton and Kaye showing up at the courthouse.
Yes. So those were to not only set up Flash 2, but set up the other movies going forward. So Kaye had her solo movie. You had probably Man of Steel 2. You had Batgirl and Batman Beyond with Keaton, and you had Wonder Woman 3. And then with the post-credit scene with Affleck, he was he would appear in Barry's his monitors, and he would say, "Come save me, Barry." And you would see like he's in a whole nother world, which will lead to Flash 2, which will explore of just them earth hopping to find Affleck, and I believe Nicolas Cage was going to appear in it, and as of course Superman and Keaton.
What if he actually showed up as Ghost Rider, and that's the Marvel DC crossover we get? That would be so good.
But yeah, so they had a plan in a sense. However, it just didn't, formulate correctly, and especially because of Gunn, he is the one that gave them notes and changed the ending because he felt as though if you were to have either one of those, Kaya and Keaton or Kaya Keaton, Gal and Henry, those were setting up other movies, and of course he wanted to rush the ending of the SnyderVerse to now just focused on his verse.
Even though what's hilarious is that the Flash in no way ended the SnyderVerse. That was the funny part. When I walked out of the Flash at the end of the movie, I was like, maybe I missed something. Where did that end it? It didn't.
Right. Having Clooney, it didn't end anything. It just basically gave you more questions. So I really don't know the thought process of why you had Clooney even featured, because it didn't make sense. You had Keaton in the entire movie, and he was again set up as the Batman for the rest of the DCEU until Crisis with Affleck, but you bring in another Batman that no one even knows why. That again,
that itself is setting up a movie. So I'm like, in your efforts to not set up a movie, you just set up a movie.
Exactly.
That's Warner Brothers logic right for you, or lack thereof, because it is Warner Brothers after all. But anyway, moving on. So we're talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. So Brit, would you like to explain what Crisis on Infinite Earths is?
Okay, so as JHEAT said, Crisis is a bloated event of a crap ton of characters, and was created by George Pérez and Marv Wolfman.
Mm-hmm.
Wolfman.
You good?
In 1985, it was basically, they felt that it was too many Earths, so they wanted to unify everything and to put everything as one single, just one iteration of things. So basically, just do away with the multiverse, which again is their downfall even to this day, because having that mindset of just setting one iteration of the character, you are limiting the storytelling. But yeah, that's basically what Crisis is. It's just throwing away the multiverse in a very bloated, it kind of felt mean-spirited too, because while yes, they did kind of give some of the characters a send-off in a sense, you still know that they died though. So it's really kind of like no way of bringing them back unless you do, unless you rewrite Crisis. And then because of that, DC has continued on with this event of Crisis. You have, I think, Infinite Crisis. You have Final Crisis. You have Dark Crisis. Just all these crises to either change what happened before, try to bring back the multiverse, or they want to kill off other Earths yet again.
Brit, you actually forgot one. The 0 Hour Crisis in Time, because DC had so their idea, we still want to do Elseworlds even though there's no multiverse. They're alternate timelines, but I'm like, isn't that the same thing? But it's I get, if you wanted to still do Elseworlds, don't blow up the multiverse then.
Right. I mean, DC is just now bringing back the Elseworlds
Label.
brand.
Which is hilarious because I'm pretty sure they've been doing Elseworld stories before they brought back the brand.
Right. Yeah, they have. I mean, it's DC is at this point trying to bait in their readers, or however many they have left. And so they know that Elseworlds pretty much was their moneymaker. Like the main stories that you know of is Kingdom Come. That's the biggest one. And I think All Stars, Superman, Millerverse, Dark Knight, Returns.
Injustice.
Well, I don't really want to talk about Injustice, but yeah, that goes with
And
it.
think about this, Brit. You know what? It isn't an Elseworld story, but should be, and then should be wiped out by Crisis. Amazon's Attack.
Oh, that should be like erased. Basically, Men in Black erased. With the Flash. Yeah,
Just deneuralize it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh God, that's JHEAT's favorite story.
It's really not. But I've read a lot of bad comics, but I think I've never been the only one that's ever gotten me to like, hey, I'm done, I'm leaving the brand, was Secret Empire and the whole Hydra Cap. That I was done, and I've not picked up a Marvel comic since. I was just done after that.
Yeah, you make a character that was developed to fight Nazis, you make him a Nazi. How did that work out for you, Marvel?
But I will say this about Crisis. It was the 50th anniversary of the DC company. And then it was supposed to be, okay, I'm just going to drop the pretense. You need variety. Not everyone's going to not just going to gobble up and consume your product just because you made something. You need variety, whether it be other genres, whether it be Elseworlds, whether it be detective stories, fantasy. You need variety in an ongoing business because the main titles, the main brand isn't always going to carry every market or every situation. Exactly. Now, there is such thing as having too much or it becoming convoluted. That's true, but that's a balance, and I don't think this new generation of writers and creative teams have found that balance yet.
Well, not only that, it's not necessarily the writers; it's the editors that have to tell them, no, this is not canon. You can't do this because it contradicts this. But also remember, when we had William from the Sci-Fi Center on the show, one of the things he says that here's why reboots and all that stuff and like creating one timeline is stupid. Because say I don't like that timeline. Say the fans reject that timeline. They're now stuck with that timeline. And that's what we're dealing with the DCEU and DCU. Is like they're like, no, we're going all in on this universe. As far as we know, they're going all in. What if I don't like what pun intended. What if I don't like what James Gunn is doing? I have nowhere to go. You could say Matt Reeves, but what if I want a different version of Superman that's not written by Ta-Nehisi Coates? I don't really have a choice here.
Yeah, and even now fans are advocating for Reeves Batman to become DC.
Wait. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Reeves Batman. I was a little confused because I was like, did she confuse Christopher Reeves Superman with Batman?
No. Yeah, they are advocating for him to be Patterson. They are advocating for him to become DCU Batman, which that was the one thing that he didn't want. He wanted Batman to be grounded, and it was like, well, he would be a team player, but he really just wanted to leave, those
standalone and self-contained.
Right. I think he even had like it was shown, of course it's during Halloween, so you did have two people in a Superman and Wonder Woman costume, but it seemed like a blink and you'll miss it, or they completely took it out because they didn't want any reference to them, those characters in that universe. So, and it was kind of implied, maybe beginning of last year, that it was a consideration. So if you have Patterson become DCU Batman, I mean I don't know, that's a missed opportunity because it feels like you do have those fans that want a more grounded Batman, and then you have a Batman that will be um with Damian and the rest of the Bat family. Because
Well, here's the
I just
problem with
can't see
that.
that. hmm
The problem with wanting Pattinson to be the DCU Batman is look at the plan for Brave and the Bold. He's already on Damian. This is the new
Exactly.
52 all over again.
Yeah, it's honestly, they wanted to, again, most of Gunn's ideas, it's not really his ideas. It's things that WB has already like planned and wanted to happen. So he basically just picked up some of the things. So Teen Titans movie, um, the Bat family being introduced, that was all planned during the old regime, especially the Bat family. I think it was going to start with Batgirl, maybe, but if they were to have something different, it would have been, the whole thing of Nightwing. You would see Tim, Jason, um, you would see Cassandra, um, and just everyone. They wanted that Batman brand. With Superman, it was basically trying to get him off the ground because while Man of Steel did succeed in its way, it still didn't succeed in the expectations WB had. And with the back and forth of Superman fans wanting the Donner film feel, but yet they don't take in consideration of the general audience, which Superman Returns pretty much showed you that the general audience does not care for the Donner films that much, or any type of regurgitation of it. Man of Steel was divisive only because you have the Superman fans who want Donner, and then Superman fans who kind of want that realism. And then Wonder Woman in 1984 pretty much, kind of stunted her brand, but she's still able to have that audience. It's just the fact that
And fun fact, Patty Jenkins legit said that like she was trying to imitate the Donner films. So those movies have sabotaged DC for like a long time.
Exactly. So, and then with Wonder Woman 3, she was going to course correct, have it present day, and with the other heroes. So you had opportunities to course correct and everything. But again, whatever James Gunn is doing, and what's so crazy is that it's starting over, but at the same time it's not, because he's saying that it's starting in the middle. So I'm not sure, but you have a Superman that's kind of like still in the beginning of being a reporter and becoming Superman. So you're starting in the middle of other characters when you have Guy Gardner that's like 60 years old.
And has a really crappy suit.
Yeah. And then you have Hawkgirl that's 22. So
she looks much younger than 22, I gotta be honest.
She really does, but still. Yeah, so all of these different ages, and we don't see these characters, they're just thrown in there. We don't see the development, and that was the problem. DC is not trying to develop their characters. They don't have the brand that Marvel has, where honestly, you can throw out a Marvel character and people will love them. I mean, Deadpool, Wolverine and Deadpool really showed that with Gambit. With, that.
It has to be done well, Brit, because they threw out She-Hulk. Look what happened.
Well, I would say that She-Hulk it was a misogynistic thing. I would say that. Because she still had her audience, though. Better than Wonder Woman 84.
All right, I'll go ahead and I'll tackle this. I'll take the heat on this one. Okay, say what you will about She-Hulk. It's bland, it's monotonous, cat ladies, all that. You can make that argument till you're blue in the face. But at least it had an audience and was actually able to build up to a degree compared to 1984. 1984 was a flaw. Like, can we all at least agree on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
As
And,
for,
yeah.
And yeah, Jen did have this character flaw, and spoilers for this lackluster show, commercially speaking.
No one cares. Spoil it.
All right, and basically, Jen, the biggest hill that this show had to overcome was not only the showrunners' reception to criticism, like they literally made Doom. Excuse me if I mispronounced.
They made an episode basically attacking YouTubers that were critiquing the show.
I was gonna say the YouTuber's name, but I didn't want to.
No, dude, do not. Do not address actual YouTubers. The other thing is like, so Brit, you understand that like the Hulk has been like hunted his entire life, right?
Right.
So Jen lambasts him to his face and says, I get catcalled and all that stuff, and I don't get taken serious because I'm a woman. So I handle stress infinitely better than you do. And I'm like, okay, let's examine this. This guy is hunted to the ends of the earth by the U.S. government, and in a previous movie, watched half of his best friends get dusted to death, and you get catcalled.
Not counting child abuse, not counting his evil father, not counting everything in Hulk 03, not counting what happened.
Yeah, I'm like, don't compare it. I acknowledge you go through some stuff, and that's fine, but don't say you do it more or better than he does. That was my that's where the show lost me. It's where the really crappy writing. So I disagree that it was on like that it fell apart for misogynistic reasons. But that's
Brit, your response?
I can get that. Okay, so it's going to go back and forth. I mean, they were writing the show off before it even started. Mm-hmm. So that is where, that comes from, is that with female-driven shows or movies, it just all depends on what it is. With Wonder Woman, you see this warrior woman, and that does get the male audience going. So of course that is going to be more accepted than She-Hulk, which is trying to be like a comedy and breaking the fourth wall. More of her love life and the actress. Some go for the looks of an actress, and so that is what I'm saying about the misogynistic reasons, because they do, attack the actress personally before actually giving the show a chance.
I can see that.
That's fair. That's fair.
So, continuing on. So, Crisis has been adapted in two different ways. One, in a okay CW crossover, and two, in a pretty dope trilogy. And the trilogy has given me many crying cat gifts from this lady right here. Very appreciative. So my problem with the CW Crisis is it literally just turned into cameo instead of like a really actual story. I mean, the one cool part is when they had Ezra show up, like the movie Flash show up in this thing. But besides that, I was like, okay, why should I really care? And then they kill off Oliver Queen. So I'm like, yeah. And then they decide we're going to keep Arrow going, even though we killed Arrow. And I'm like, what? That doesn't work. Then you get to the Crisis trilogy, which my only issue with the Crisis on Infinite Earths trilogy is the anti-monitor design is basic as hell. And then they're like, let's just make it so he's like an army. And I'm like, what?
I'll probably go into more detail on Crisis in my TomorrowVerse retrospective, so cheap plug on that. But ultimately, it was just bland and boring. Not okay. If you wanted to get the TomorrowVerse did get a raw deal. They got a 5-year plan as a series of transition films to keep the DC animation department going until everything with James Gunn and Warner Brother Discovery was solidified. They got about a good 4 or 5-year plan. I will give them that. They made the best out of a bad situation. But this was just bland. Even with all the continuity stuff taking it took too much time out of the film. It was constantly buried in filler. And even if I can even forgive the anti-monitor design being basic. I can forgive all of it. All of it, if it just wasn't boring. That's the worst of it. It's just a sad, generic bore.
Well, the other thing is, like, if they hadn't split it up in 3 parts, I think it would have been less boring. And then in 2 parts, okay, then I can see that. But 3 parts, when like the first part and 2 part flow together so well, but then you just cut them up. What? I don't understand this. Brit, your opinion on this?
Okay, right. I would say it. I want to give them some slack because again, they had a rush. They weren't able to build on what they wanted. They wanted more Bat Family films. They wanted more JSA films. Wanted more Wonder Woman perspective. They didn't even have a primary like Justice League built up. What they did was within the Crisis Part 1 and Part 2, they, with Barry going back and forth, they wanted to show like timeline and how and fill in the blanks a little bit. You have, but it still felt incomplete because you don't know this Justice League. I mean, in the Green Lantern film, they mentioned there was an Earth 1 Wonder Woman, but yet we didn't see her. Then they were first at the Watchtower or the Hall of Justice, and then with flashbacking through the Crisis film and whatever that whole thing, it just really didn't flow right with the previous movies. And then you had Supergirl. They wanted to give her backstory as well, and it just took way too much time with trying to fill in the blanks. And what that should have showed was if they wanted to show, these characters and they known that they had only a limited time, what you wanted to really show, you should have set those movies up first. So we didn't have to have the Man of Tomorrow movie because they didn't even care for Earth 1 Superman or Superboy anyway. He pretty much was the back character for Kara. The Legion movie, you could have had that. JSA, you had that, which was primarily a Wonder Woman film from the very beginning. So more of that. Long Halloween, it did not deserve a 2-parter. I just don't know why they did that. That just completely was a misuse of their time, and that could have been another JSA film because they really wanted that. Then, with Crisis being 3 parts, it didn't make sense because, again, it was just filler, and it was trying to drag out so much that was unnecessary. Even Psycho Pirate, that just some characters they gave time with, it just didn't flow right, and you didn't really care for the character. But yeah, the cat gifts that I sent Jared for those moments, those were some very solidly written moments. But other than that, yeah, it was completely useless and a bore, and it just really showed that if they would have done like a Kingdom Come movie that they wanted to do, I would not have wanted that at all, because the budget is already very low. So to adapt this movie, to adapt Kingdom Come, that would have been it would have been a disappointment. And that story gave DC so many new fans, and it is a beloved story even to this day. And it's kind of like DC's story.
Yeah, it is.
To just completely trash in a way that story with low budget animation. Yeah, that's just completely a disappointment for the many disappointments DC has.
That's why whenever I see people on Twitter saying, "Hey, we should get we should get a Crisis. We should get like a Kingdom Come live animated movie. I'd love that. I want this. But then these people complain when the studios don't represent it perfectly, and I'm like, right now, be careful what you wish for, because if you think that it's like when they say that they want like that they ascend, it's like essentially when they say, oh, I want a Wonder Woman movie or something like that. I'm like, I got news for you. I want that too. But unless there's a change in leadership, WB is just going to have her be the daughter of Zeus. That's a warrior and bloodthirsty. That's just it. That's the way they see her. So I got news for you. Just be careful what you wish for. So then we get to, so we're going to talk about each individual crisis in a little more detail. So JHEAT, tell me, what'd you think of the CW Crisis?
To be fair, it was not as bad as I originally thought it was going to be. Because, first of all, we did get some good news out of this. Around this time, you had the Bat embargo finally lifted. You had interconnecting characters. I'm not saying the Batwoman show was good by any stretch of the imagination. I think it was dumped fire from day one. But even with all that baggage, at least you had Arrow and Stephen Amell. I believe that's the actor's name. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, Stephen Amell.
Stephen Amell, thank you. He got his swan song. Arrow was able to finish off nicely, even with the backdoor pilot for Green Arrow and Canaries. I think you can find the pilot online. Which never happened, but I think you can find the pilot online somewhere. But still, you had a solid resolution through and through. It was a 5-episode, week-long crossover. Arrow sacrifice. Although Supergirl did end up surviving, unlike the original comic, you at least still got a good resolution. The Paragon stuff was a bit much, but all in all, you're not really expecting this to be an adaptation on a CW budget. So I think it's good for what it is. Not great, but good.
That's the thing. The Paragon is like it's from the original comic. It's just not in the main comic. It's from a tie-in, and you all know how much I love when they have all these key points in tie-ins. You all know that. But the thing about this is, like, at the very least, I do appreciate that we actually got a Crisis with Superman. But I would have preferred it if instead of Batwoman we had Batman. Because it's so fun fact, Kate Kane did not this version of Batwoman did not exist when the story came out. And I get the Bat embargo thing, but it just, I don't think it really works. I mean, they did have Kevin Conroy come back in the Kingdom Come suit, but then you discover that he killed Superman. I was like, what?
Paranoia aside, that's not something Bruce would do. If he was pressured in a situation to break his no-kill rule, it would be over Joker or someone along those lines. Or if he was mind controlled by Poison Ivy and acted under pheromones, he wouldn't. I'm just saying, if he was going to break that rule, it wouldn't be towards Clark. It just wouldn't. Yeah,
it would be toward the Joker or any of his villains. But it's like, I get what they were going for, and you know what? It from what I saw of it, because I didn't watch the whole thing because I stopped watching the CW at some point because I got bored. But it wasn't that bad. And the suits look pretty good, mostly. But all in all, it's not the best, really. Then we get to Animated Crisis. And Brit, I picked a very special picture just for you. Look at the bottom picture.
Yeah, that scene. I wanted to say one thing for the ArrowVerse.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the one thing I didn't like was how they used Kingdom Come Superman suit and just the whole story kind of for Brandon's. First, they always associate that just with an older Superman. And it's kind of like they wanted to, because Superman Returns is kind of like supposed to be connected to the Donner films, they wanted all of that to be this CW, Superman plus Kingdom Come. And not only that, but they kind of like shaded Kingdom Come in a sense of trying to say that he had like the son Jason, when you know that he was in Superman Return kind of like not the best father, symbol in the movie. So for them to kind of like try to spruce up in a sense that film, but you say that with Kingdom Come, how they kind of rewrote it, that the events of Kingdom Come never happened, and they turned the black S into to the yellow S. So that's the one thing that I didn't really like, because it felt like you were trying to rewrite Kingdom Come instead of honor it.
That's what, and it's kind of funny you bring that up, Brit. That's what it feels like when James Gunn uses the Kingdom Come S as the S for his Superman, that he markets as more brighter and everything like that, and even has that like yellow part of it. And even William said, I love the S, I just don't want it on that Superman. And I said, and I brought it up, here's the thing. That S is associated with one Superman. And everyone's like, oh, he's using the Kingdom Come logo. This is so good. And I'm like, hey, nerd boy, here's what you got to understand. Look at the context around the story that S is being used for. And you'll see that it should not be a early Superman S. It just shouldn't be that.
Right. I mean, if they are trying to build up to Kingdom Come and it'll turn from the yellow bright to the black, I get that. But if you're solely basing it on the aesthetic and some of the plot lines, again, I don't agree with that, because Kingdom Come still has a lot of characters and you care for them, but it doesn't associate with older characters, though. You know, that's so superficial to me. So if you have an older JLI group, I mean, they have really no connection. There's no correlation with Kingdom Come, but you have these older characters, and some people are saying, like, it's Kingdom Come in reverse. It's like, okay, that still doesn't make sense, and that's going to piss off other fans of these other characters, because in order for you to do a Superman movie, make it to where we care for Superman. It's not that you down other characters for him to be propped up, and you think that that's the way to sell the character. So for these other heroes to be like 50 plus years old, and apparently they suck at their job, so they need Superman to come in and teach them or whatever.
And they're doing the will of a corporation, which I got news for you. No Guardian is going to let a Green Lantern do the will of a corporation.
Yeah, so if you are setting that up, that is going to, again, piss off majority of the fans that really don't care for Superman. So if that's the plan, you're already messing up.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to Animated Crisis. Now, here's the thing. Are the movies perfect? No. Is the TomorrowVerse perfect? Hell no. But Brit, and I said this in our review of the TomorrowVerse, this was the first animated movie universe. This is the first DC animated universe in any way that actually treated Wonder Woman with any respect whatsoever. DCEU did not. DCAMU did at first, but then she turned into a mouthpiece. In this, she was just Wonder Woman. And that's why I'm a little more protective of this universe. That's it.
Right. This is the first time you really saw Wonder Woman have a prominent role. And she wasn't just swinging a sword or anything like that. She wasn't a mouthpiece. She wasn't chasing after a guy. She was just herself. She made the last and ultimate sacrifice. She built, with who she was, her heart, and as committed as she was, and the feeling that she had of being immortal, and all the people that she saw die, and things like that. She created a whole new world, and then you see the ending of her, greatest wish was to become mortal. And not only that, but that shows how so many, some fans want to say, oh, she's a goddess, so she moves away from humanity. No, this completely shows Diana's humanity and how she's so much more human and so much more of, I would say, even a better hero than all the others. Because really, with that ending, I know it was written for her to do the sacrifice, but so many of the characters, and again, I know that they didn't have lines or anything, but they were so useless. Like
Mm-hmm.
even Constantine, he just, for him to be a powerful as who he was, and basically he's the catalyst of everything that had happened. It just seemed like, okay, now it was his, his choices that made this happen, and he couldn't even fix what he messed up. But to give that to Diana to show how powerful she was, and just her, like I said, her greatest wish was to just be with her mother and to be mortal, to be happy. That is a great Wonder Woman story. We didn't have her.
And we also got the dope scene where she's fighting with the lasso of truth.
Exactly. When she threw the sword down and basically used the light of the lasso, again, that really showed Wonder Woman. Because, and we see this all the time, we DM each other all the time about how it's the back and forth thing of whether Diana should use a sword or not, and, when is it appropriate? Yes, she can have a sword, and it all depends if she's fighting, these shadow demon things, but it was kind of too slow. And what they said was it was just like pure light. So yeah, of course, the lasso worked as a purifier, and that really showed that Diana is a character of purity as well. So yeah, it was a lot of things there that I really loved, and I really wish we would have gotten more JSA films, because she would have been that leader. And
Right. Mm-hmm.
with the previous animated verse, TomorrowVerse, yeah, that verse I mean, of course we liked, Justice League War, Throne of Atlantis, Justice League versus Teen Titans. But yeah, that back half is completely in the void for me. I don't like how she was used as a mouthpiece, and the fact that it was intentional, and just so mean spirited. So this really gave TomorrowVerse really gave that vindication.
Yeah. Your thoughts, JHEAT?
As for me, the TomorrowVerse, I like to call it the transition era because of that 4 or 5 year plan I previously mentioned. So I'm surprised they were able to get as much as they did, even with stacking a Crisis adaptation as a wrap up. But with all that being said, again, I'm not the biggest fan of shipping or shipper wars or anything like that, but I respect you guys' opinion and your appreciation for these characters as my fellow colleagues and nerds. But if I had to throw my expertise into the whole, yeah, it was largely for synergy in the comic side because the New 52 pretty much imploded. SuperWonder pretty much broke up, and I want to say Volume 4, Volume 5 of that comic.
They never broke up in that comic.
Huh.
They were alive until they were together until his death.
It was a half breakup. It was a breakup, but then after issue 25, when Clark did the whole trials with the gods, Arrow said something about you still want to marry her. So they end up back together, and at the end, he was basically wanting to still propose and marry her.
Yeah, so they never really broke up. They were together until the end. But continue on, JHEAT.
Thank you for clearing that up for me, Brit. But I believe that despite the limited aspect of the TomorrowVerse, this version of Diana, although technically Earth 2, when we never really got a main Earth counterpart, likely due to production costs, she had a pretty solid arc from a leader to someone who felt and didn't want to take the next step, always felt jagged about life or jaded because of her immortality. But I feel like her arc in Crisis was just a retread of what she was going through in Justice Society and why she wouldn't accept and try to live a life with Steve Trevor. Granted, I'm not the biggest fan of Steve Trevor.
Well, that's beyond the fact that she said no because he's Steve Trevor.
Well,
Disregard for the Steve Trevor being a male, Lois Lane aside.
Hey! Don't insult Steve by comparing him to the.
It's a reverse of the same trope, Jay.
Hey, don't compare Steve to the Devil's Bride herself, okay?
Wait, what does a Raven's mom had to do with this? Like with Trigon? Like, come on. You set me up for that perfectly. Come on.
Yeah. All right. My point is, at least Steve is as much as I loathe Steve Trevor with the power of burning suns, I loathe Lois more. That's what I'm trying to say there.
I would say that actually Diana was jaded because of the loss. However, she was far more open with her romantic feelings towards Clark than she was with Steve, actually. So that opened her up a little bit more. It was just, still the immortality thing. That really wasn't a thing for her until Crisis. So, she was much in the JSA film, she was much more battle ready and just that leader that they needed. And again, we needed that second JSA film to see her transition from the battle ready, fighting as young as she was, seeing that her feelings of losing her mother and sisters, we only know that from Crisis, that all the Amazons died and she was, left alone for a while. Where does she go? We don't know that. However, the only thing that she does feel more openly free to express is her love for Clark. So, that is the one thing that I would say would be my only gripe, is that we didn't have that in depth of the rest of her backstory.
Yeah. And yeah, I do wish we got more of those JSA movies because the Wonder Woman series could have been pretty cool. So then we get to DCEU to GunnVerse. Now, here is the thing. Like I said before at the beginning of this episode, the problem that James Gunn is going to run into is the general audience is not tracking reboots or anything like that. They're just not. They're not on Twitter. They're not. Ultimately, it's the idea that you should have given this story a conclusion, at least for the general audience sake. Because here's the thing, and William, in fact, has said this in other streams. It's like, let's say the universe starts. Under current WB leadership, there is like no guarantee that the story is going to come to completion. You know how I know that? Look at what happened to the SnyderVerse. There was no resolution of that story. If you resolve the story, then you can say, hey, you completed the story, even if it took many years. And you know what? I would have been more willing to give this thing a chance. What they should have done is when the Snyder Cut came out and they saw how big it was, they could have said, okay, you know what? We'll modify our plans. Zach, do your 2 Justice League movies, and then we'll just call it they will just call it and say, okay, we completed the story. We're good. Move on. JHEAT?
And that's what AT&T and Warner Media wanted to do originally, right off the momentum of the Snyder Cut, at least roughly through the pandemic, at least roughly around 2021, 2022. But then Emmerich, I don't know, I can't confirm whether or not he had already offered the Warner Brothers already. I just know that Emmerich, finagled the numbers and got himself out of Dodge, and that's how we got Warner Brothers Discovery. I'm not going to say he did so purely out of spite because of everything that happened with Hamada and Sarnoff and all that, because we're still feeling the effects of that corporate behind-the-scenes civil war to this day. But I would not be surprised at the very least, if spite wasn't a factor, at the very least, Emmerich sabotaged that and sold off Warner Brothers purely to get himself out of that debt, to get out of Dodge.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Brit?
Well, okay, so, I mean, all of this trying the debt thing, trying to sell off different properties in the way Zaslav is just, how he's handling all the different properties. And okay, first, we don't know. They're making, well, Gunn. He's making these his what he's more interested in first. And while Zaslav on the other side is saying to investors, we have Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman as priority, that, they are the tent poles, and then everything else falls, into place after that. But on the other side, with Gunn, you have his C-listers, you have Peacemaker, first, you have I'm still not in agreement of having Supergirl have the first female-led movie.
Mm-hmm.
I really do believe that should have been Wonder Woman. And then you have saying the Authority is going to have a movie. Rumors of Plastic Man, Huntress, Sergeant Rock, these kind of films, but you don't have a Justice League yet. You don't have your primary Justice League members having their solos. And so with those announcements, and then the way Zaslav is continuing to cancel shows and movies and, tax write-offs. And then you have HBO Max basically being dead weight now. And also, I've never heard of a company to say that they are negative credit. That is still so funny to me.
And Brit, $9 billion write down. How about that? $9 billion.
Yes, and yes, it's still about this debt. They are now contemplating selling off again. So it's kind of what first, I don't think that we are going to get, I think we will get chapter 1 of GunnVerse. They will push it, regardless, even if it doesn't do as well, they will still continue on. However, I don't think the chapter 2 part is the one thing that I don't think, or they might whatever he has planned, they will cut it down to rush a Justice League movie within the next 5 years.
And knowing our luck and knowing what he's already established, it'll be the stupid JLI that shouldn't even exist in this universe yet. So we'll get the D-list Justice League. Wouldn't it be hilarious, Britt, if this universe is shut down before we get any Wonder Woman?
Well, the only thing Wonder Woman we will get is Paradise Lost, which is supposed to be in 2026.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, Britt, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing. I don't think this universe is going to last past Superman, because if Superman fails, and the way that Zaslav is trying to convince because look at the language that Zaslav has been using describing Gunn. Oh, he's on a mission from God to save DC. And it's the way he says, oh, we have a sure hit on our hands. After what happened with the Flash, and he said we have a sure hit on our hands, I really think if Superman bombs or doesn't perform the way he wants it to, I do think they'll say, yeah, we're done. At least the shareholders will go, you're done.
Well, yeah, that is the thing. You have Zaslav saying, pumping up things and making promises to the stockholders and investors. But then on the other side, you have Gunn that's not really showing what Zaslav has promised. So if if Superman doesn't do well, as well as expected, then yeah, we won't have a DCU yet again. And the only thing that I would say, I really believe that they will be kind of hard-headed and will rush a Justice League movie. They wouldn't rush the movie as JLI because, I mean, we don't want a Justice League in a retirement home.
But here's the problem, Brit. Here's the problem. They can't just throw together Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman into a Justice League if we don't have Batman or Wonder Woman. Because if Superman fails and they do what you're suggesting and just stop at Superman, but say we'll do a Justice League movie, they would need, according to fanboy logic on Twitter, you have to have a movie to set up Batman, Wonder Woman, and the other Leaguers.
Oh no, they will definitely just hire. If they're saying that, well, Gunn said that they are far from casting a Batman.
Yeah.
And with Wonder Woman, I mean, if you want Paradise Lost to be, to start production and everything within late 2025 and premiere in 2026, then you have to start, finding or a Wonder Woman at this point. You do. So
what I think they could end up doing, this would be hilarious, is if we get like rumors later that they're getting concerned, and then Paradise Lost all of a sudden is completely redone. It's not like about the Amazons, it's just about Diana, like the entire. It would still be like the bare bones of the story, but then Diana is there the entire series. It's not taking place before her birth. In other words, they restory it. So they're like, okay, we need a Wonder Woman now. So they could say, they could, because Batman, you don't really need a setup movie. Batman's the only character where I think you could just throw him in a Justice League movie and people would understand who Batman is. But with Wonder Woman, I feel like what they would do, let's say Superman comes out and it's not good, they could fast track Wonder Woman, redo it to just be about Diana and maybe a few of the Amazons. That way they establish Wonder Woman and then jump to Justice League.
Exactly. I mean, from the movies, they want the Authority or Gunn want the
That
Authority, Sergeant Rock, and I think Huntress was rumored, and Plastic Man. Yeah, none of those movies I don't think will actually come out.
Mm-hmm.
And they will definitely probably replace those with the main, primary Justice Leaguers if they want to give them a solo, or they would just completely scrap those. And honestly, again, I don't know why you would give the Authority a movie.
Because James Gunn's in charge of green lighting stuff. Because remember, Brit, and you even said this, a lot of these projects are stuff that James Gunn had like submitted and it got rejected.
Yeah, that is true. And I think I shared this with you on DM. I don't know, but Tom King did confirm that he actually pitched the Green Lantern show. So,
oh God, that is really concerning. If Tom King pitched it,
right? So so pretty much the only reason why Green Lantern is, they did want Green Lantern. Always wanted John Stewart to be the rookie and Hal Jordan to be like the older mentor type thing. They wanted the buddy cop thing going on. But it never got off the ground. They wanted Tom Cruise even as Hal Jordan for the longest as well. But to say that just the pitch for DCU is from Tom King is very much a red flag. And also even Supergirl, just because James Gunn likes the story and it's his friend's Tom King his story, he greenlit that to be a movie. Some of the things you can't have nepotism, because you don't know it messes up a solid plan if it doesn't go right. You can't just give your friends, the green a silver platter. You just can't do that. And especially with Tom King, because it feels like he is ruining every character he can. It's like that meme that we see of the like Grim Reaper going door to door.
Yes, yes. It's
That's
like I saw this great other thing a content creator said when they said, "Beware when Tom King comes to comes for your favorite character."
yeah, it just feels like that, and especially with what he's doing with Wonder Woman and how I believe his Jenny Sparks comic was not well received. Um, Honestly, even Supergirl, it was a very low seller, and the only reason why it became, you know, a bestseller now and winning awards and stuff like that is solely because it's being adapted. So that's really not fair to.
Yeah, because Woman of Tomorrow was in the dollar bins before it got announced.
Yeah, so a lot of these, stories that are being adapted, they were forgettable. No one actually cared for them. And that's not fair to stories that actually have, were popular and did have the support. And, they're not being adapted, which they should. I mean, for Wonder Woman, I would say League of One would
Oh,
be
yeah.
a wonderful story to adapt for her.
Or what's the Alex Ross one again?
Spirit of Truth.
Spirit of Truth. There you go. That one too.
But we have Paradise Lost, which, like I said,
By the way, I read the actual books that DC designates as like the ones that are being adapted. Diana plays a very key role in that. Diana and Donna. So I'm thinking, how are you going to cut Wonder Woman out of a story that heavily features Wonder Woman?
Yeah, naming it Paradise Lost. And I'm thinking what it's supposed to be is, well, obviously it's going to be Diana's origin. And it seems like it will take from Historia and maybe Perez.
Okay.
But
so what I'm going to do is I have the trade, Paradise Lost. I'm going to open it up and see how early Diana shows up. You ready? This is a little experiment. It's a little experiment. Keep going. Oh, almost immediately. This is literally page 3.
And she's an adult.
Yeah, she's right there as an adult. So I'm like, when I read these stories, I thought it was just going to be an Amazon's focused story, because you could do that, but don't call it Paradise Lost. This is my problem, Brit. This is why I harp on like the crappy suit or this, because this universe is being promoted as more true to the comics by the actors, by James Gunn, by the fans. So when you do this crap, when you adapt a comic book storyline and cut out the key, she's on the freaking cover, I get a little pissed off and a little feeling of hypocrisy is playing right now.
If I may interject, unless you're mapping out a second season, I feel like, now this is just my personal opinion, so take this with a grain of salt, but I'm pretty sure more than likely they're trying to keep Diana / Wonder Woman in a more ensemble capacity rather than giving her a solo project within the confines of the GunnVerse or Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters. You can call that as ludicrous as you want. I'm just saying that maybe from the higher ups or the corporate side, they want to keep her in an ensemble.
JHEAT, do you know what's hilarious about that statement you just made?
Sure.
So let's assume you're right. They don't want to give Wonder Woman her own movie in a chapter literally called Gods and Monsters.
I didn't say it was a good idea.
Wait, guess what? The first trade of the Perez run is literally titled Gods and Monsters. So I'm like, I think that it was just Gunn putting his hand into a hat and plugging up what title sounds cool. Gods and Monsters. That's a Wonder Woman project, and she's obviously not a priority, so we'll just rip that title. That's what that seems like to me. Because so far of the projects, I'm not seeing the gods part. I'm seeing the monsters with creature commandos, but I ain't seeing any gods.
Yeah, that
That's
is
the
kind of
annoying part.
weird. You don't have any gods. Even like Cersei isn't a god. So yeah, I mean, you would have the gods show up at some point, and
You would
there's
think.
nothing.
You would think, but this is the DCU we're talking about, where comic accuracy only matters where it's where it's convenient. So here's the thing. So to do a crisis, like we said before, it was going to start with the Flash movie, if that movie was a better movie. But
Right.
the way it basically ends is Barry would return, but he returns to apparently like the worlds kind of merged or something like that. And obviously, in the original ending, Affleck is on an unknown Earth. Keaton is the Batman. Kaya is Supergirl, and then we have Galen Henry. Am I understanding that correctly, Brit?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So essentially, can you elaborate a little further?
Okay. So with, like I said earlier, the Flash film has been in production hell. They didn't know exactly what story to tell. At first they wanted Flashpoint, which was I don't think they would have done the way the animated movie did, with having Wonder Woman and all of that. I don't think so. But they did want I guess the bare bones of it. And I think Supergirl was to have the Superman origin of that story. I think that's always been the plan. I don't think like we would have seen a very, very sickly, skinny looking Cavill. But yeah, so that was the first thing. Then it was going to be just a Flash movie. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be anything like an event or like that. Another director left because of creative differences. It was going to be a team up with Cyborg, Ray Fisher. That completely went off the rails as well. So now you go with Hamada's plan again with Crisis and wanting to pay homage to, just as the CW did and the TomorrowVerse. Jim Krieg, he said that he didn't even know when they pitched or when it was told to them to the plan and the pitch of doing Crisis. He didn't know that CW was also going to do Crisis. So it was kind of like a coincidence that you have Crisis in live action silver screen movies, live action TV shows with the CW, and then the animated with the TomorrowVerse. So, but it was going to coincide, I guess, with the anniversary as well. So with Flash, again, you use it as a Flashpoint Crisis setup, and the whole thing really started to collapse when they couldn't find the role, back and forth with Henry too. Because even if you have Flash as the main character for Flashpoint or Crisis, you still have to have a Superman.
Yeah.
And Henry was just in limbo. And you also had Johnson doing The Rock. He wanted to have sort of like a Kingdom Come-esque or versus, Black Adam and Superman showdown as well. So again, you still have so many different ideas going about. So with Henry, they wanted him back, but then they didn't. Want him back, then they didn't. And the plan was for him to come back during Crisis and then go from there. So with that, they've already kind of chosen to restart Superman. But for Henry to have his closure, they were thinking about a Man of Steel 2, or just something to give his Superman, like I said, closure. But that fell through, and we see how he came back in Black Adam, and it was, like we said, the ending credit scene with Gal and Kaye, that fell through, and then Affleck. I mean, I would say that with Flash, it was embarrassing because they wanted to go very campy. They wanted to go, and it felt like they were trying to find still that Marvel audience of, I don't know. I really don't know what movie of Marvels to even compare that with. But just that, it just felt like they wanted to put all their eggs in one basket within this movie. And they had such a high expectations, especially with having Keaton. And, you know, that callback of that, of Burton's, you know, movies. And it just all kind of like fell through. You know, Kaye, she was picked out of 200, you know, actresses, how they made it such a big deal. And that was just her only role as playing just what she did within the movie. Keaton, again, he felt like he was just doing a role, and that was it. That's all. Miller was kind of going through his own thing personally, but he still, you know, tried to give it his all with playing Barry. And, you know, you ended off with his tooth falling out and Clooney. You know? So yeah, that, I don't know how you can, if Hamada or whoever else, not even just Gunn, but even if they would have given the reins to Johnson and this would have still came out, you know, I still don't know if, with them still wanting to do the Crisis film, how can you set that up, you know, with that?
Yeah, it's essentially. So what do you think, JHEAT?
As for me, I just feel like this is a very mixed bag. This could really go one or two ways. The Flash was always going to be a disaster because their go-to was Flashpoint trying to panic, press the reset button. So Flash was always going to be a disaster regardless. You can't really use Flashpoint as a de facto, basically as a Flash movie to just clean house or press the panic button. If you are going to use Flashpoint, you still have to build up to it. Sure, you could argue it was set up in a meta aspect and how pretty much the DCU pretty much imploded because of bad business decisions. But in context to the movies and films, not so much.
Arguably, it kind of was, though, in ZSJL because he goes back in time.
Yes, the time travel aspect, the fact that Barry can actually pass the speed of light, the fact that he could actually do it. But if he's been moping and brooding about his father's imprisonment and his wife, what really pushed him over the edge to actually go through time travel? Like, he just had a whim and then Bruce tried and failed to talk him out of it?
I can see that. So,
I mean, you don't have to use Eobard Thawne because he made a good red herring in the context of the original comic, but you need a little bit more to set it up, in my opinion.
Okay, that makes sense. So then we get to Black Adam. So here's the thing. And JHEAT, you were there. We were reacting to the Cavill announcement, and that's where they started to lose me, because they make this big deal. They have Cavill announce he's coming back as Superman, liked and retweeted by literally every DC account. So anyone that tells you that Cavill took it upon himself to announce his return is lying. I know some people have been saying that, but it's like he got Cavill back, and then you saw the mass, like, what's the word? Mass fan positive reception to this. And then you say, nah, we're not going to continue doing this, or we're not going to close it out. Doesn't that sound kind of moronic, Brit?
Right. And what I don't know, it was the duo before Gunn that actually planned to have Man of Steel 2.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was still to have a usher in a new Superman. So they pretty much wanted in quote unquote Elseworld type thing to, give Cavill that closure. And the fact that his reception of, coming back you know, The Rock knows how to hype things. So, his whole plan of at that moment of I think it was SDCC,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
he didn't know if, Cavill was able to be Superman though, because WB's back and forth. However, when he was able to get him, I think in August, and then Black Adam came out in October. So you had 2 months pretty much to get Cavill into the suit and everything like that, and film his scene, to be ready on time to not delay the film any longer. And obviously, when people say that there was no contract, you know, um, signed, I would think that a contract is signed before he starts filming or before he puts on the suit. So I really just don't believe that there was no contract signed. I feel like something was pretty much broken because Cavill wouldn't have posted what he posted online, and they wouldn't have um, retweeted and commented "Welcome back, Superman." It's just a lot of um, corporate drama and behind the scenes that we don't know, that they don't want us to know. But I just feel like there's something missing. And what they would rather do is humiliate Cavill and make it seem like you said, he took it upon himself to post something. But I don't think that he would post it if he didn't get that reassurance from WB themselves.
Well, from what I remember is that from what I heard, the story was there was no
I agree.
contract. It's just DeLuca and Pam Abdi told him, yeah, we'll work out that later, but you're Superman. You can go ahead and announce it.
Yeah, I still don't really believe that as business people, you would just go by word. You would have that contract signed because he has to get paid. He has to have signed something in order for him to be in Black Adam, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it's still something that just seems like it's off, very, very off with what's been reported. Uh, and it was enough for, I mean, even though it was kind of like a fourth wall type thing, but and everyone knows that it has been a mess, but for it to be a Deadpool as well,
And for people
it
to
just has
make
to
it an
be.
actual shirt with the DC Studios logo.
Yeah, it just has to be something a little bit more that's not being told. And Cavill, I mean, he um, was very diplomatic. You know, he felt like he even went on interviews and was so excited to talk to Gunn. And then a month or two later, for him to announce that he is no longer Superman, and so Gunn basically fired everyone that's not his friend. I just feel like that's very unprofessional. And again, I feel like some type of contract was probably signed or shown, but
Mm-hmm.
was broken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. That's an interesting way to think about it. What do you think, JHEAT?
Okay, as for me, yeah, this definitely was a PR stunt. we will probably never know what really went down behind the scenes. Maybe they were banking on Black Adam being a decent success or trying to get 700 million plus, because I think the final box office numbers was around 650, 645. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I just feel like this was just a publicity stunt to boost momentum for Black Adam, regardless of The Rock joining the Rock Johnson's ego. There might have been some.
Yeah. According, it made 393 worldwide.
Oof.
Because, and the thing is like when you look at its like budget was 195 million, but when you factor in marketing, you have to double that, and it didn't exactly reach that point. It was like just shy of it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, the story that The Rock wanted to tell, he wanted the JSA versus Black Adam. But it still was it was a passion project, but it's also like a vanity thing as well. And just the way he wanted to kind of take over DC, it felt like he wanted to give the fans what they, wanted, but he still wanted to have that control of Black Adam being the big bad. And yes, his ideas, however, were good, because we were going to have Superman versus Black Adam teaming up with Wonder Woman and Shazam. However, the only thing is that The Rock didn't want to, fight Levy. And honestly, with the way Levy he's shown himself lately.
Yeah, he's kind of an a-hole.
Yeah, you can kind of understand why The Rock wanted to distance himself from him. And just his whole thing with Shazam, it just felt like they wanted that same the same way Shazam, the first Shazam, was, when it was more kiddie and more comedy. The second one was more emotional, and it felt like Levy just wanted it to be a comedy, and he's playing these kid characters, and he's not really taking anything serious. So, and it was also the fact that he felt like, oh, I'm friends with Cypher and Gunn, so they are going to keep me as Shazam. But now he's very much singing a different tune, and he seems, very salty about how.
Well, it's like it's even when he goes, you don't even want to see the Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. It's not as good as James Gunn's version.
Yeah, so it was very much I would say
vanity project gone horribly wrong.
Well, I was going to say a lot of bootlicking. I was going to say another word, but a lot of bootlicking in order for him to keep the role, and it backfired. Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I would rather take The Rock's ideas, because with Gunn right now, I feel like he's only focusing on what he likes with the C-listers, and I'm not a fan of them as much, and the fact that Wonder Woman, and there's no like female lead, a prominent female lead. I don't really care for Supergirl. I just feel like that, again, was just because his friend is Tom King. So it's not really giving and the story itself is not very empowering.
It just turns Wonder Woman. First off, it's a ripoff of True Grit. So that's the first thing. The second off is that it's pretty much turns Supergirl into a cursing sailor mouth.
Yeah, so that is not very empowering for young girls. So I don't know why. Again, this is the first female-led movie. It should be Wonder Woman. With The Rock, it just seemed like he wanted still Wonder Woman to be prominent, and she would have had, Wonder Woman 3, regardless of how 84, underperformed, or, well, it didn't underperform, but critically, I would say, and the fan reactions of it. But even with that, you should have rebooted Wonder Woman with Superman as well.
Exactly. So, continuing on, then we get to Batfleck, arguably the best Batman. And so he was going to be stuck in an alternate world. That's where this still photo is. This is Batman recording the little clip. And then it's like, essentially what this is harkening back to is in Batman versus Superman, when Flash is going, save Lois, she's the key. No, she's not, but she's the key. You have to save her. So it's essentially that. And then how Barry concluded that by saying, find us, Bruce, you have to find us. It was essentially going to be Batman saying, find us, Barry. So it's pretty much that. What do you think, Brit?
Yeah, like I said, this was a setup for Flash 2. Another end credit scene that they had was Aquaman drunk, making a very offensive joke about the transition of Superman into Supergirl.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, I mean, and they still had that too. So you didn't. There are a lot of movies that have post-credit scenes and it sets up something, and you don't get the sequel. I would have rather have the Batman post-credit scene than that one. It just seemed like it very much seemed like the Flash movie, of all of its emotion that it tried to convey with Barry so conflicted about his dad being in jail, his mom's death, and everything like that. It just turned out to be a big, humiliating joke. And that, that really just didn't sit right, especially just with the whole DCEU, and especially how fans on the internet are saying, the last scene of DCEU is Arm eating a roach.
Yeah, I'm like, that was my God, I really hated that. Or it's like in the middle of this great speech in front of the UN, Arthur then concludes with saying, "I'm Aquaman, woohoo!" And I'm like,
and
you could tell that was a reshoot by the way like the green screen was. But I'm like, you know what? At a certain point, that's why I don't consider that's why I don't consider the SnyderVerse to be anything beyond Zack Snyder's Justice League, because then you get, or maybe Aquaman 1, because then you get into some real BS, and I don't want to believe that this stuff is canon to Zack's universe.
Yeah, it just seemed a lot of it just seemed like they wanted to turn it into a joke, and it really reminds you of New 52, how they it wasn't so much of turning New 52 into a joke. It was just more
character assassinating it.
Yes, mean-spirited, and making the characters antagonistic and character assassination. Especially with DC YOU, it just how they wanted, with trying to do the whole miniseries of obscure characters, and with the truth arc and everything like that. That's exactly the train wreck it felt like. You train wreck.
Well, the other thing is, like with DCU, the selling point on it, according to the marketing, was story over continuity. And what that meant was you could have, that's why in the Batman story, you had Jim Gordon being Batman, but in Justice League, it was Bruce. So it was like, it wasn't supposed to like line up in any way. Or it's like why Superman was, he was in a t-shirt and jeans the whole way, but he was on a t-shirt and jeans, like driving a motorcycle across America. But in the other one, he's sleeping with Wonder Woman. So it didn't really work that well.
Right. None of it. And that's exactly how DCEU felt at the very end. I mean, they wanted, with Shazam 2, with what was so weird is the obsession of Shazam having a crush on Wonder Woman. And the fact
But here's
that
the thing, though. They could have made that easily work, because Shazam 2 should have been a Shazam and Wonder Woman team-up movie, because you're fighting the gods. There's no reason for Wonder Woman not to be an integral part of that story beyond just eye candy.
Exactly. And it was basically, she was basically used to show how Billy is having, his puberty moments and such. But it was just the way that the gag kept going, and it was unfunny. And also, you have the director. When AI first came out, it was all, when it first came out, it was weird, kind of like distorted, abstract type art, but you can see the prompt. So for him to do an AI of Wonder Woman kissing Shazam, and then to say that, oh, she knows, figuring out that he's underage, it was just a very bad joke. And we already have a Wonder Woman 84 when, body snatchers and, assaulting a guy because she thinks she's mentally thinking and seeing him as Steve. But to kiss an underage boy is just like,
well, not only that, Brit, she was sleeping with a guy that they heavily imply is LGBT. That's all loads wrong.
Right. I really just don't agree with any of, the decisions that they made for the back half of DCEU. And also, again, it goes back to, even honestly, everything really aligns in such a twisted way. You have comics, just the back half of,
I know,
New
right?
52.
Isn't that the weird thing, how the movie dysfunction is literally mirrored in the comics
and in animation? You have DC, you have New 52 transitioning to DCU, and then Convergence, then Rebirth. You have the animated Tuckerverse with that back half of Death of Superman, and then TomorrowVerse. I would say that the first half was kind of bad, except for JSA, and Legion was okay. So with that whole thing, and then you have live action DCEU, where it was just a jumbled mess. So yeah, DCWB, just everything creatively with their characters, they have really royally screwed up with it.
And that tells me it's not necessarily a DC problem. Like I said in the interview with William, I said it's not a problem with the characters of the IP. It's a problem with the idiots in charge. So anyway, now we're going to get to the actual story crafting portion of this. So Brit, how would you use a Crisis movie to conclude the SnyderVerse?
Okay, honestly, my idea is just straightforward. Everything remains the same, except for even the Flash movie can remain the same. A little bit more tightening up of the script of, and taking out the more cringe type scenes, like the bridge scene was very unnecessary for a Wonder Woman cameo. That you could have if you did want a Wonder Woman cameo, just that whole Barry and Bruce being stuck in her lasso was unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else you can keep, and then the ending, give the correct ending, whether it's Keaton and Kaye or Keaton, Kaye, Henry and Gal. Keep those. Take out the drunk Aquaman post credit scene, and keep Affleck's post credit scene. Transition into Flash 2, which would have been the multiverse road trip to finding Affleck's Bruce with Keaton and I think Nicolas Cage. Have, cameos, but honestly, the cameos be more respectful and not a terrible CGI fest. And as we spoke about Wonder Woman 3, have that movie be more of a character-driven, give the closures, I would say, to other characters. Have it within Diana's perspective of seeing, Clark, where at that point of what is he doing as a reporter, and as Superman, how has his character evolved? If she has become a mentor for Kaye's Supergirl, that is comic accurate for Kaye to become an honorary Amazon to train. At that point, we will bring back the Amazons too, and Diana going back to the island. So you see that. And then Keaton, Keaton is with Batgirl, but I would say he is just within his own thing, whatever. But he's also with Barry with the whole multiverse hopping. And then we just go from there. And then with the Crisis Part 1, I would say Flash 2 is Crisis Part 1. And then Part 2, if you're going to split it that way, have it be where it's just a meet, a simple team up with your SnyderVerse iterations, with the GunnVerse iterations. Have those Justice Leaguers meet, because if Gunn is already started in the middle, I would say he might as well already have his Justice League fully developed or something, because his whole starting in the middle just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm trying to make it make sense. And yeah, just already have your Justice League, let them meet, and SnyderVerse, after everything, is not so much as it's being erased, or it's you can still have the door open. Just as CW did, they didn't erase anything. They pretty much left the door open they gave homage to the other shows. They showed the other shows endings or whatever, but they still left them intact. So you can show the SnyderVerse and the Justice Leaguers there are still intact, still doing whatever they, are doing. But you show that, okay, now we're into GunnVerse. And I think that would have been a happy medium than the Flash ending messily as it did. And you have actors, being blindsided and fired without closure.
All right. JHEAT, how would you do Crisis?
As for me, I mean, it depends. I would probably be better off doing a standalone adaptation and just because it's going to be hard to do Crisis in an interconnected universe. It can be done, but it would require a lot of setup.
Okay. But
a lot of Brit pretty much took a lot of my ideas already, because this is a pretty good setup for what you and her have cooked, and so I agree with a lot of what she said. So I tip my hat to you, Brit. Metaphorically, of course.
Thank you.
We always do. We always say that if at least Brit and I ran DC, all their problems would go away. But DC is not smart enough to hire us, so there you go. As for me, yeah, I would keep a little bit more of this, except I would, for one thing, the part that I would fix in the Flash is instead the part that I would change if I were capable, instead of having the stupid CGI like doubles of the characters when Barry's going back in time, I would have it where, because Titans did this better than the DCEU. In Titans, when Beast Boy is traveling through the multiverse, the portals kind of open, then you just see clips from those worlds. So it's like you see like Shazam flying, you see like the Flash running. So there are ways that they could have done this. There are ways that they could have done this a lot better instead of just very CGI fakely like having these characters, and still had like, you could have had like maybe like Christopher Reeve, a clip from Christopher Reeve's Superman, and like I get that you wanted to have like Nick Cage as Superman, but at a certain point, you should have at least just shot that and edited it live action, because reportedly with the Nick Cage cameo, they did film him in the cameo. They then replaced it with the like CGI-ness, and this whole thing about them saying, oh, it's supposed to be like that. Yeah, I would believe that if you had Barry say in the movie, hey, when I go back in time, I go into this weird chrono ball thing and everything looks distorted and weird. You never had him say that. So ultimately, when you make that like declaration, I'm sorry, that rings hollow.
Right, you're very much backpedaling, and the only reason why they backpedal is because they got called out on a lot of things that they did wrong. I mean, they spent millions on a commercial with the Super Bowl. I mean, and they hyped this movie up to be just the end all be all, you know, the new trend, the transition for DCEU. You know, even Gunn was saying that this movie would be a setup for his new universe, but we didn't see it. We saw none of that. He gave notes, but what were the notes? Which was just Barry's tooth falling out in Clooney. You know, it. And again, I still do not know why Clooney was involved. You know,
no.
that
Again, it set up a movie, and I love where Gunn said, "Oh yeah, he's not going to be the DCU Batman." But
so why was he there?
Well, why was he there? I know, I know for like laughs, but still, it was like, if this movie's supposed to conclude and maybe even point to it, what you should have done is at least have it where like he just arrives in a new world, and then you could even have it where like he looks at a newspaper that says Bruce Wayne on it, and we don't see who it is, but he's like, who is this guy? And instead of showing Bruce Wayne, that way you could still do that scene, except without the tooth falling out, and still have it.
Yeah, you didn't have to have an actor. You could have, if it was to transition to GunnVerse, which we wouldn't even want Miller in GunnVerse, because you would think that Miller is the Flash for his verse, but or even just have him say, you know, he sees a newspaper of the new Justice League, and it's kind of like, yeah, he asks, who are these people? Like, this is not my Justice League, and then he ends up disappearing and going off somewhere else, you know, something like that, other than a tooth falling out and bringing in Clooney. That just did not make sense, and it still didn't set up for us to feel how Gunn is starting in the middle. I just don't feel like, I don't think audience, you know, will connect with the characters already being as old as they are.
Well, here's the thing. he could have started in the middle. Here's why. If the first projects were all the A-list characters, then he could have started in the middle. Because we know who Superman is, we know who Batman is. To a certain degree, since the movies, we know who Wonder Woman is. People that watch TV know who the Flash is, maybe Aquaman. Don't have Cyborg, you can have someone else. But the point is, if he had started with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the movie, the A-list characters first, and then done like maybe origins for all the other characters, then you could have done that. Then you could have started in the middle because we already know who these people are. But when you're starting in the middle and then bringing characters that no one knows, that's if you're gonna say, well, they'll do the origins. They'll do the origin of the Authority in the Authority movie. The comic that they're adapting is not the origin, and that's gonna cram too much in the story. That's what people forget. You can put more in a comic book because there's no like. It doesn't have to be a certain like hourage of length.
Yeah, a runtime. Right.
Yeah. I mean, granted, in terms of costs, they say keep it to like this amount of pages. But the point is, as long as your series sells well, you can put as much as you want in there. That's what people forget. That's my big pet peeve with the comic book fandom. They think because it works in comics, it will work in movies. And I'm sorry, that is not the way media works.
Right. Here, Jared. Here.
And I have the backup of Sam Liu on this one, so continue on.
Yeah.
But JHEAT, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I thought you could hear me a second ago. But yeah, I definitely agree with what you were saying, Jared. So
okay, good. Just want to make sure. So, really, to conclude, the thing about this is what they should. The one thing I want you guys to take away from this episode, people watching, is that if they had actually concluded the universe, because neither the Flash nor Aquaman count as a conclusion, guess what? You would have at least said, hey, we finished the story with those characters. Then you can recast whoever the hell you want because you've ended that storyline. You've ended the arc with Cavill's Superman, Godot's Wonder Woman, Affleck's Batman. But when you just haphazardly just stop and then just move on, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. It doesn't work from an audience perspective. Because here's the thing, DC, since Justice League, has had a major problem with public trust in the brand. That's why a lot of these issues happened. Marvel can get away with some of this stuff because they have the public trust to a degree, or now they're rebuilding it. DC has never had that. That's why I'm so leery of all these D-list characters getting movies before the A-listers, because DC isn't in the space Marvel was when they greenlit Guardians of the Galaxy, where people will show up because it's a Marvel project. DC has never had that. Do I wish they had it? Yes, because in my mind, and Brit, you can tell me if you agree with this, DC characters themselves are better than Marvel characters. They're just not being executed properly.
Exactly. I mean, Kite Man has an animated show.
Before Wonder Woman. And Brit, we're very ensconced in the Wonder Woman fandom. What's the one thing the fandom always asks for?
An animated show. I mean,
even though what they forget is that Bruce Timm would be involved in it.
Well, not necessarily. If it is from, well, I would say that
Brit, with the way James Gunn tends to hire iconic people, do you really think he wouldn't ask Bruce Timm to be involved?
I would hope not, but you have a point.
This is James Gunn we're talking about. He grabbed Tom King because he liked his comics.
That's true. I mean, it is a catch-22 double-edged sword for Wonder Woman because she has incredible stories, but with who is in charge, they feel like it's very complex to, how to adapt her stories. And, again, with Kite Man, the only reason why is Kite Man was made a little popular because of Tom King. So it just feels
And
like
then
a lot of...
as soon as Tom King leaves the book, no one talks about Kite Man.
Right. And I mean, he is the one that's pushing these characters, just like he is with Trinity.
I've said this before. As soon as Tom King leaves the Wonder Woman book, Trinity will never be referenced again. They'll put her in the future. They'll find some way to never reference her again.
I mean, honestly, that's why he's saying that he wants to stay on the book for 100 issues, because he knows that whatever he is, honestly, he's he isn't setting up well, as we know, but he knows that everything that he is trying to establish will be ignored, just like his Batcat stuff. I mean, once he left the book and Tinian took over the book, Batcat broke up,
Or like, you notice how we never hear about the daughter that was introduced in Batcat? Again, and that's the thing. I guarantee you, the other thing that's going to determine this is when Trinity's getting her own comic book series, the fans, remember, the fans do not like Trinity. If that book flops hard, I can see them saying, nah, we're not going to have Trinity. Make it be an illusion by the lasso of lies or something like that.
Yeah, it's going to be something, because Trinity already is basically going to be like John Kent. I mean, he had his solo book and it went only, I think, 70K, I would say, for the first issue, and then it just continued to drop. So of course they are going to prop it up and flood the market with a bunch of variant covers, but people, or just as Tim Drake. I mean, Tim Drake is supposed to be a popular character within the DC fandom, and his solo comic didn't do good at all. So what makes you think Trinity will
Well, the
do
Tim
better?
Drake series, I know JHEAT is chopping at the bit to get in on this, so I'll let him go, but I'll just first say there were a few other reasons why the Tim Drake series
Well, yes,
flopped.
I know that, but I'm just saying, just in regards to who he is.
First of all, I grew up with Tim Drake. I'm a fan of Tim Drake, even though I know the character's kind of stagnant. He fulfilled his original role. Like Tim Drake has pretty much been stagnant since his Red Robin run during Batman Reborn in 2009. Ever since that wrapped up, the character's kind of been stagnant, and Damian's been more prominent. I will give you that. However, at the same time, you're comparing what's essentially a Super Sons revamp with Trinity to a shelf title that barely made it a full volume before it tanked. I get where you're coming from. Objectively, that is a valid criticism, but I feel like the context is a little different in this. The context is a little different because you're comparing an original character to a quote-unquote questionable decision with an established character for PR, a shelf title, or what have you.
That was just established for the writer's self-insertion. But anyway, so yeah, I think. All right, so let me unsure this. So I think that's a good place to leave this episode. And
2 hours later.
Yep, that's the way it normally goes. Well, considering our last 2 episodes have been 3.5 hours each, I think we're ending pretty early this week. But,
yeah, we are.
So to set up next week, next week's episode will be a live stream, and we're going to be discussing, hopefully with JHEAT, and JHEAT, hopefully assuming everything aligns, we're going to be doing our Battle of the Sexes episode, which is basically Superman versus Wonder Woman fandom and why the fandoms for each are problematic in some ways. And then Brit and I have already started outlining the episode roster for September. We got some crazy ones for you, a few involving the Absolute Universe, so more on that. So now in terms of JHEAT, where can we find you and what we got coming out on your channel, bro?
As for me, you can find me at JHEAT Blaze on YouTube. We're almost at 270. Let me check right quick. But I'm pretty sure we're at 270 subscribers on the channel. We're at 268 and we're pushing for 300 before the end of the year.
Woo!
If we can get 300 before the end of the year, I will stream and live react a full reaction to Velma both seasons. Only if you get me to 300 before the end of the year.
Oh my goodness.
Get this man to 300. So, Brit, it's an inside joke that Pilati and I are trying to find ways to break JHEAT. We almost got it with Gotham Knights. He still has to finish it, by the way.
I think Velma. That's coming out on Halloween.
Essentially, Brit, we're trying to one bad day JHEAT.
Oh, geez. I mean, I think Velma will break you. Yeah.
I honestly think it will. So, Brit, what stories do you want to tease us with?
So of course we have ShelterVerse, which is ever expanding. The story that we are adding now is like it's tied neck and neck with my first fave, which is story 3, but we aren't going to be talking about this story right now. But yeah, the story that we're talking about is very good, I would say, and the way Jared is having me, all emotional with the cat gifts is something. Then I have updates for all the other stories that I've neglected. Athens is one more tweak, and that will be posted. Jared, of course, you get an exclusive first. Then I have a couple of one-shots that I really want to get out, so that will be it. And then, just updating all the other stories that I have. And also with the Superman and Wonder Woman Instagram, we are now less than 100 followers away from 65,000. So everyone who has supported, I want to thank. And that's it.
All right, Britt, I'm playing this clip on this show for you.
Now, we will become an army.
There you go.
And stay tuned for more new DirectionVerse content as well.
Hell yeah. So stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lane. She belongs to General Zod. Zois and Max about for life. We will see you later.